Panoboso, Kyotava. Welcome to Science Intellect Hub. We are going to talk about organic chemistry reactions and reaction mechanisms. Let's see what they have for us. They have a lot of questions for us here. And unfortunately, this has started to become my favorite only now. When I was in high school, unfortunately, I saw trauma. I was traumatized, just like most of you will be during the preliminary exams, just like most of you will be during the final examinations. In organic chemistry, I believe that this is somehow a bit more challenging topic than any other you will find in organic chemistry. That's a personal opinion. But let's get rid of that mystery. Let's solve the mystery. In actual fact, let's turn this topic to our favorite Mfana So, halala right now. Do you remember our abbreviations? I'm talking about the abbreviation USA. I'm talking about the abbreviation SSS. I'm talking about the abbreviation SUE. Do you recall those? This will be for addition. This will be for substitution. This will be for elimination reactions. But what does the US mean? Well, this will be, of course, for the reactants part. It means the reactant, if ever the reactant is unsaturated and the product is saturated, well, we are talking about addition. But if we start with a saturated reactant and end up with a saturated product, we'll just say substitution. Easy, man. If you just can get used to these abbreviations, you'll never go wrong. And bazo buzange exam mfana boso. They will always ask as to what type of reaction is represented there, or they'll say name the type of reaction represented by whatever, equation 1 or represented by reaction 1 or things like that. Halala right now. Well, now let us zoom in a little bit and of course try to answer the questions as they are asked. They say compound P is used as a starting reactant. So we know for sure that compound P will be our reactant. This compound here, it will be our reactant. In each of the two reactions as shown in the flow diagram below. So we have about 3 reactions that will take place. That's fine. We have reaction 1, reaction 2, and reaction 3. I hope you can see them. There is reaction 1, there is reaction 2, and there is reaction 3. So, halala right now. So the first thing that you do when you get to these questions, for whatever organic compounds that they've given you, for any compound that they've given you, any organic compound that they've given you for that matter, you must first tell as to whether is it a saturated compound or is it an unsaturated compound. Well, maybe the question may be, what is saturated compounds, or what is a saturated compound? Well, when we talk about a saturated compound, we are talking about a compound, of course, whereby we only see single bonds. Saturated single, S for S. Saturated compound are those compounds whereby we only have single bonds. But pay careful attention. Those single bonds must only be between carbon and carbon. If, for instance, now you have carbon and oxygen, and we have another carbon and we have another carbon. So in this particular example that we have here, we cannot consider this as a saturated. Yes, it does have a double bond, but the double bond is between carbon and oxygen. We are only concerned about the bonds between what? The bonds between carbon and carbon, the bonds between carbon and carbon. And we only see single bonds. So the conclusion will be, well, this will be then saturated. Halala right now. So when we look at compound P, C5H11Br, you may use your general formula, of course, to try to understand as to which one is this one. Halala right now. So compound P, if you are to draw its structural formula, it will look as follows. This is compound P. This is how it looks. So you can recognize already that from compound P, all you see is only single bonds. So therefore, this will be a saturated organic compound. This one is saturated. Now let's look at this one, 2-methyl butan 1-ol. Sounds scary but nice. So what you'll recognize about this compound here is that if you are to draw its structural formula, maybe to make life easier for yourself, you can just draw structural formula as fast as you can, though you are not gonna get marks for that, but it will help you to be able to understand as to what is saturated, what is unsaturated. Well, this one, when you draw it, you're going to realize that you only see single bonds between carbon atoms, so therefore it's also saturated. So equation 1 or reaction 1, already we can make a conclusion that holy SSS. So SSS means substitution. So already this equation would come to a conclusion that it is substitution reaction. Let's see what they ask. Or before we do that, remember, unsaturated compound will be then a situation whereby we are having double or triple bond. For as long as we are having multiple bonds, then we can come up with a conclusion to say, well, this is unsaturated. Why? Because it has multiple bonds. Because it has a double bond, or it has double bonds. It has a triple bond, or it has triple bonds. For as long as there are multiple bonds between carbon and carbon, then we may argue that it is unsaturated. Right now, 4.1.1, name the type of reaction represented by 1, SSS. So therefore we can say, well, then this is substitution reaction. So that is the conclusion then about 4.1.1. So let's look at 4.1.2. So right now, 4.1.2, let's see what they say. Is 2-methyl butan 1-ol a primary, secondary, or a tertiary alcohol? Perhaps one of the ways to determine that would be to draw the structural formula of this compound, and this is how it looks. Now, from how it looks already, you can be able to determine that in actual fact, this is in actual fact a primary alcohol. So it is a primary alcohol in such that the carbon atom bonded to the hydroxyl group, the carbon atom bonded to the functional group is also bonded to just only one other carbon. Whereas, of course, for a secondary, we would have maybe something like this carbon, and then this would be the hydroxyl. This will be carbon, this will be carbon, and this will be something else. And if that is the case, then we will be talking about what? We would be talking about a secondary alcohol. But what about a tertiary alcohol? Let's find out. So this will be a situation whereby, of course, we are having the following. We are having a carbon here, a carbon there, and a carbon there. That way, then, we would be talking about no longer a secondary, but we'd be talking about a tertiary carbon. Right now. Now, question 4.1.3 says, write down the structural formula of compound P. Well, let's go a little bit back and ask ourselves about which one is compound B. Compound P. There is compound P there. And, well, this is how its structural formula looks. It looks as follows. So, right now. So now let us go to question 4.1.4. Name the type of reaction represented by reaction 2. So let's go to reaction 2 and see how it looks. Already we know that we are starting with something that is saturated, and we end up with a compound. We end up with compound Q. Now the problem is that we don't know what is compound Q. So perhaps, of course, from the requirements, or rather from the conditions there, we must be able to tell well, or we must be able to anticipate, perhaps predict as to what is compound Q. That way we'll be able to tell whether it's unsaturated or saturated. So from our elimination reactions, we will recognize that one of the conditions necessary for elimination reaction to occur would be, of course, concentrated sodium hydroxide. So it means then our prediction would be to say that compound Q is perhaps also it is perhaps unsaturated. We will start to see now the formation of a double bond that we will be talking about, an unsaturated product, and it takes us to SUE. So what is that type of reaction? Elimination. Halala right now. So when we name this, we'll of course write elimination here as, of course, the solution to this question. Now they say, to which homologous series does compound Q belong to? Let's go and find out compound Q. Halala right now. Welcome to Science Intellect Hub. My name is Mr. Mojakisanese. They call me Mr. Emom Fanaboso. Compound Q. So there is compound Q. So remember that we said we started with a haloalkane, and then we ended up with an unsaturated compound Q. So now the question that we are asking ourselves here is to say, remember that we just mentioned that compound Q is unsaturated somehow because of the conditions that were met there of concentrated sodium hydroxide. So it means therefore our resultant, our product, is going to be unsaturated. So it means there is a formation of double bonds. Now the question is, of the homologous series that we have, which one has a double bond? So you can agree with me that there is none other than the alkane, or rather the alkenes. So the alkenes are the ones in actual fact which have double bonds. So therefore the product that will be formed here will definitely be an alkene. So the homologous series to which compound Q belongs to is an alkene or a bonatab. Now they say, name the type of reaction. I told you, so you have to definitely make sure that you are able to name the type of reactions happening there. Now they talk about reaction 3. So in reaction 3, we start with something unsaturated, and the compound, the product is compound R. So ask yourself, what does perhaps the conditions tell me here? But what you can agree with me, if you've went through the examination guidelines, you'll understand that in actual fact, this means that I'm going to end up with something that is rather saturated, something that is saturated. I started with something unsaturated, I end up with something saturated. We will try to find out as to how did we come to that point whereby we end up with a saturated compound. Halala right now. Do hope that you've recognized that in actual fact all you have to do is to be able to tell as to whether your organic compound is saturated or unsaturated. But the problem would start when you have things such as compound Q, because you don't know whether compound Q is saturated or not. Compound compound R, you don't know whether compound R is saturated or not. So there is some bit of theoretical knowledge that you must possess, and the next session will be about that exactly. We will try to find out, how did we find compound Q? How did we find compound R? What is compound Q? What is compound R? And obviously check the examination guidelines. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Organic compound reactions. Welcome to Science Intellect Hub.